This is a very special presentation of the American Uncensored News Network, Crisis in the Ukraine. I'm Rick Drader, coming to you from the AUN Studios. Joining me today is Major General Paul Vallely, retired, graduate from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, served a distinguished career of 32 years in the Army. General Vallely served in many overseas theaters, including Europe and the Pacific Rim, as well as 2 combat tours in Vietnam. General Vallely has been a military analyst on television and radio for many years. He co-authored the book Endgame, Blueprint for Victory in Winning the War on Terror, Warfooting, and Baghdad Ablaze. He's a member and founder of the Iran Policy Committee. He's also the chairman of the Stand Up America US, and he was a senior military analyst at Fox News for many, many years. General Vallely, welcome to our discussion today. General Vallely, let's start out. Please assess the military operations that are occurring in the Ukraine right now.
Well, as we look in the feeder reports I've been getting this morning, Rick, it seems Putin and his armed forces are probably 24 hours or more behind their objective, which was to take Kiev last night. It looks like maybe tonight they're going to try to press it. But the Russians are coming in from 5 different fronts, from the north, from the east, and from the south into Ukraine. And they hope to be able to basically envelop 2/3 of that country within the next 72 hours. The Ukrainians are putting up a great fight. The reports I got with the missiles that we gave them over there, the javelins, took out a whole column of 15 tanks. And one of the Ukrainian aviators evidently has taken down several of the fighter jets of Russia. So this is not an easy battle that's going to be accomplished overnight. They're arming many of the Ukrainian civilians now. I don't know how many Ukrainians have escaped into Poland and even into Germany and other surrounding countries there. They've been going out by train, by buses, by car. The remaining people are sheltered underneath down in the railroad entrance places under the surface there in Kiev especially. So I don't know what's going to happen in the next 72 hours. I know Putin wants to take the whole country now. And
there were a lot of people in the very beginning of this. A lot of people were speculating that this would be a very limited action by Putin, that he would only take the 2 areas that were that were loyal to Russia. It's gone much beyond that. Do you think this is a big surprise?
No, I think in the back of my mind, Putin wanted the whole Ukraine. Now, you got to understand, eastern part of Ukraine, 60% of it is pro-Russian. They've had thousands. I've heard 40% of that 60 have had their passports switched to Russian passports. And they're very loyal to Russia. They know what a corrupt government and a corrupt country Ukraine has been for years. And then the realization that Hunter Biden and his dad have been on the take for millions of dollars from a corrupt Ukrainian government. And then Zelensky came in, and he's sort of caught in the middle between the eastern Ukrainians and the neo-Nazi forces there, which occupy are very well organized. You can track it back all the way to the SS Waffen and the Wehrmacht of these neo-Nazi Ukrainians who have infiltrated every part of the government and control most of the military. And if Zelensky would have gone against them, they would have taken him out in 24 hours. But Zelensky's still there in Kiev, and he's standing firm of still being their leader. I don't know whether there's an armistice, a treaty that can come about where Putin says, I'm going to stop right now. We want a new government in the Ukraine. We'll negotiate with that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Putin will take the entire country at whatever cost may be necessary.
You mentioned that you felt the Ukrainians are putting up a big fight, but can you assess the way they have been responding to the Russian attacks?
Well, they've done it with their air, with their helicopters, with their ground forces. They do have militias in those eastern provinces in the Donetsk, Donbass area. Their navy, which is south of Crimea, there on the Black Sea, I understand that's been neutralized already by the Russians. So they've solidified that southern entrance into Ukraine. If you can look at the map and see that, and that's Odessa, which is down there. And then they've come in through Chernobyl on the top, through the Belarus, with the direct arrow pointing down to Kiev. And then the forces coming in from the east going to the west. And so that's the layout of the map right now of the forces. And the Ukrainians are deployed across all of those areas, whether they're the armed forces or the militia, and even 50 to 60,000 weapons they've given the civilians in Ukraine. They've been handing out for the last 72 hours. And hopefully training them all to use that. So that's the situation as I see it, Rick, right now.
General Valley, when you say that this is a very corrupt nation,
right?
Why then should it or does it matter to us? Why does it matter to Europe?
It doesn't matter to us. It's not a direct threat on the United States. And I am sick and tired of us getting involved in all of these countries in these unnecessary wars like Vietnam, Iraq, and so on. We had a right to go in and destroy the training camps in Afghanistan, but we should have been out of there right after we did that. But the cost to us of these unnecessary wars that are not well thought out by our leadership really worries me more than anything. And I don't have confidence in the generals and admirals now. All they've done is woke and more worried about teaching CRT within the armed forces. And so that's a worry about the morale within our own armed forces. But these are situations that, you look at NATO, it'd be hard pressed to put 2.5 divisions together of armor or infantry units in NATO of all of those countries. And you're not going to find the Brits and any of the others going into the Ukraine and putting on uniforms to fight the Russians. I mean, they're very concerned now about the pipeline flowing natural gas and energy to the people in Europe. And so Biden has lied to the American people when he said, I have an alliance, they all agree with me. That's not true. They don't. And they don't necessarily want to put their forces into Ukraine against the Russians. But they've lied so much to us, Rick, from the White House. I mean, constant daily lies that come out about just about everything, about energy, about the economy, jobs, inflation, and all that. I cannot imagine, Rick, even in my lifetime, that we would have such an incompetent government and people leading the United States. It's a total embarrassment.
Well, John Kerry said this morning that his message to Vladimir Putin wasn't stop the killing, stop the fighting, but let's not forget what impact things might have on climate change. That comes from John Kerry, former Secretary of State. So that's pretty disgusting. It's pretty disgusting. Yeah. Have you heard anything about casualties on either side?
Yes, I have, but I can't verify them. I got a report in this morning that up to 5,000 Russians have been killed.
Wow.
10,000 wounded, 400 tanks, 15 aircraft.
I got so 5,000 Russians have been killed so far?
That's what this report says. Now, I can't verify that. I don't know. It may be inflated. That's difficult to calculate each and every day. Sure. Casualties on either side. You don't have the people going in, counting each body and then reporting it back somewhere. So they could be highly inflated. So that's the only report I got this morning.
What about on the Ukrainian side?
Nothing. I've got nothing on the Ukrainian. The initial thing, they had 180 killed or something like that. I'm sure there's much more with the bombing. So I would take with a grain of salt any of these reports that we're getting right now. But I would think when we've seen a number of tanks destroyed, aircraft destroyed, I think the casualties are probably fairly high for the Russian armed forces.
Wow, that's unbelievable. General Valley, we're talking about the Russian military against the Ukrainian military. It seems like it's overwhelming odds. I was speaking with J.D. Gordon the other day, and he said going back, and these figures do go back into the like 2014, 2015, that the Russians actually spend from 60 to 80 times more on their military than the Ukrainians do.
Mm-hmm.
So can you give us some examples of how an overwhelming force attacking a weaker opponent and a weaker opponent prevailing?
Well, we used to calculate something like 8 to 10 to 1. You would have to prevail over an enemy to completely defeat them in a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. In this case, Russia has overwhelming superiority. They've used some of their missile rocket units already and their aircraft, but they have these tactical nuclear weapons that are at their, they can use at any time. Plus many of their bombers that are loaded with very high conventional and nuclear weapons. So they've got an arsenal that can take on any country in the world, much bigger and better equipped than the Ukrainians. So I think he's limited the attack so far with his conventional aircraft, Navy, and armed forces, the tank units, the infantry units.
When you say he, do you mean Zelensky or Putin?
No, Putin.
Okay. Putin. Well, some people speculate that the Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom, where the Russians are fighting because they were drafted. Does this give an advantage, or what advantage does this give to the Ukrainians? There have been reports some Russian soldiers have surrendered, saying they don't know why they're there. They weren't told where they were going to be going. They don't want to be fighting the Ukrainians. What advantage is it someone fighting as a mercenary versus someone fighting for their freedom?
Well, if you're fighting for your country and you have leadership that's going to inspire you to protect your towns and your villages and your ports on the seacoast, all your infrastructure, it's a battle for their lives. Their lives change as of this week entirely, depending on what happens in the final moments of the battle there. And so they are fighting, and the Ukrainians have said we're going to fight, and they are doing it. But I'm sure you have a percentage of the Russian armed forces are probably asking themselves, what are we doing this for? It's totally unnecessary. But that's what happens when leaders use their armed forces to basically procure their end game, whatever that may be. And end game for Putin, I think now is all Ukraine. And NATO's not going to, if you look back, Rick, Russia's not attacked a NATO nation in 77 years. And the whole thing about NATO was to counter Russian aggression. Then, with the dependence on energy for Europe coming from Russia, that developed a whole new sense of alliances between the European countries and the toleration of whatever Russia would be doing. And that's why now, how many armed forces have you seen enter into Ukraine from NATO now?
None.
Now they've been providing supplies, and Poland there has taken in over 200,000 Ukrainians, I understand, so far, maybe even more. And so Poland is going to be hard pressed to take care of all the refugees.
This is a special presentation of the American Uncensored News Network, Crisis in the Ukraine. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the AUN Studios. My guest this segment is Major General Paul Vallely, retired, 31 years, distinguished military career, experience in the European and the Pacific Rim theaters, 2 combat tours in Vietnam. General, let's talk about the United States and NATO. Should we take any role? Should there be an effort to resupply them? Germany has announced that they're sending 500 Stingers to the Ukraine.
Mhm.
Turkey is saying that they're cutting off access to the Russians from the Black Sea. Talk about the response coming from the rest of the Europe. Talk about the response coming from our country. What should we do? What are we doing? What should we be doing?
I think it's very sparse. I think it's not sufficient to sustain them in a very long battle with the Russians. Maybe more than a week or 10 days, I would give this thing. I think it's going to be over. And that's really just my forecast based on seeing what's happening now. And so, yes, they are giving them the supplies. They're giving refuge in Poland and in Germany of
Hmm.
Ukrainians. So when you look at being able to give them more javelins that they can fire from apartment buildings or downtown and take out the tanks and the armored vehicles, that's going to be very important. And it's working. But is enough. We don't
Hmm.
know that.
Hmm.
And we don't know how long the European countries will even sustain giving any more if Putin continues to control the battlefield there. But
Hmm.
certainly the aircraft, we have many aircraft, of course, in Europe, bombers as well as fighters, and they're in the air now observing, but we're not taking out any Russian aircraft for sure or engaging them in combat in any way. So it's strictly right now supplying Ukraine, but Ukraine's got to sustain itself in each and every battle against Russia. And of course, Russia is mounting more fronts, as I said. Now they're encapsulating Ukraine on 2/3 of the country, and that's from the east to the north and the south, and controlling the ports that Ukrainians have on the Black Sea.
All right. How would you assess O'Biden, as I call him? I call him O'Biden. That's my name for him. How would you assess his leadership in this?
He has no leadership. He has no leadership skills whatsoever, and he never has. And as Obama once said, if you give us something to Biden, he'll F it up. I won't say the whole thing, but you know
Thank you
what I'm
for that. Since we've got to follow certain rules of the FCC.
right. That's right. So Biden is a puppet, but he's obviously mentally incapacitated to some degree. I'm not a psychiatrist, but he needs a serious mental evaluation at Walter Reed Hospital, which he should have been getting and should be demanded by everybody. Then you got a total incompetent Kamala Harris, who's she's clueless on about everything in the world
Mm.
as she travels around and tries to portray herself as some sort of sophisticated statesperson. And then, you have our weak members of Congress, uh, Republicans as well as Democrats. You have a totally corrupt FBI. We can't depend on our intelligence services for any good intelligence. They're corrupt at the CIA. Rick, I mean, we are in bad, as they would say, bad
Mm.
straight about our ability to compete today in the world. I mean, you've got to lead. It all goes back to leadership, Rick. Even, I mean, in the military.
Well,
And
speaking of leadership, do you believe that any of this would be happening if Donald Trump was in office?
absolutely not. It would not be happening. Trump would have worked something out, just like he worked with Xi, he worked with North Korea. And the word I got after I left Moscow, after I set up the first meeting between Trump and Putin in March of 1917, I engineered that along with Mikhail Bogdanov, who was in foreign ministry there when I
Hmm.
visited. And what I attempted to do later was do another Gorbachev Reagan type of meeting, and it never happened because at that time they started the Russian hoax. They kept demonizing the Russians, demonizing Putin, and that's gone on for 5 years. And then word I got back from an intelligence operative that I work with in Europe that Putin wanted to meet with Trump, but he was getting pissed off. That was the word, because the Americans kept demonizing, blaming Russia for everything, which was all false. They were all lies. Putin knew that.
Right.
Trump knew.
Well, General, 62% of the American people agree with you that things would be better with Donald Trump in office. But do you see this step by Putin as the first step in a journey to reunite the Soviet Union?
Well, they throw that out as a scenario. My sense is he just wants his borders protected. He wants to make sure they're solid.
Mm-hmm.
And if he overtakes Ukraine, then he'll have a solid border with NATO. He doesn't want any buffer countries in there that would take advantage of Russia in any way that would be instrument or forged by NATO or by the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he can afford ever to take back all those countries and be responsible for them. They're trying to develop their economy still, and their economy is going very well, I understand. They're making billions and billions of dollars.
The Russian economy? Sure, the Russian economy is, and they're doing it off of oil and gas. A lot of that oil and gas is coming to this country. We're importing like 600,000 barrels a day. I think that's part of the problem, that when you look at the Soviet Union in 1991 and 1992, it was a basket case. It was broke, and you can thank Ronald Reagan for much of that, because Ronald Reagan bankrupted them. And do you think that there's a possibility that we could do that today by shutting off oil and gas coming to this country and supplying Europe with its oil and gas needs at a cheaper price than what Putin can sell it to him for?
Well, as you could see, we started to ship natural gas over to Germany and Europe. Things were working very well until Biden was elected and basically ditched the pipeline in the United States, Canada, the United States. We were energy independent. Here, let me give you something on sanctions. We haven't talked about that.
So on my list, it was coming up, but let's do it now. Talk to me about sanctions.
I'm ahead of you.
Yes, you are, sir.
Our whole attack against Russia has been sanctions. Okay. And the foreign minister of Russia even said Putin doesn't give a damn about sanctions. He's going to do what he wants to do. But here's what happened, and it is happening. When you sanction somebody, guess what they do? They do workarounds. If they can't get goods and supplies here, they'll get them from there. Guess where they're getting all their supplies and support and money currency transfers? Through China.
Well, show me, General, if you can, show me one example where sanctions have worked. Did it work in Cuba? I don't think so. North Korea, Iran, where? Show me. Where has sanctions ever worked?
Well, to throw up South Africa is the only possible place that ever worked, but that's questionable too. What a weak way to deal with the situation we have now with sanctions. And of course, they'll come out, well, they'll really feel it in 6 to 10 months. Give me a break.
Well, that was Biden's remark the other day. Let's see what the sanctions have done in 30 days. 30 days, a lot of people are going to die in 30 days. General, do you believe that the Ukrainians prepare themselves properly, efficiently for this invasion?
I think they have the best they could with what they had. Yes. I think they were ready. They knew where Russia was doing the build up in the north, in the Belarus and in western provinces of Russia, also on the Black Sea, all the way around to Odessa. So I think, yes, they did probably the best they could with the leadership that they had and with the supplies and assets and the arms they had. They had to go to war, Rick, with what they had. And so far, that seems they're doing a great job, but we'll have to see.
Well, Biden stepped up and pledged $600 million in aid. What do you believe?
Where's that money coming from? We're broke. We're going to print more dollars and send it over there. I mean,
well, they'll just print it. They'll just print that up. But What I was going to ask is, in what form do you think that money should be, and in what type of aid at this point? And how do you get money and arms and weapons and medicines into a country when you look at a map, of all the military actions that Russia has taken, has involved itself in Ukraine, it seems like, is this country now isolated from the rest of Europe and the rest of the world? How do you resupply them?
Well, a report came in this morning. All the airports and airlines have been closed going back and forth east to west in that area. And I'm sure with the Russian aircraft going overhead, if they see these transport planes coming in, they're going to shoot them down. Mm-hmm. So air basically has been, as I understand, it's been cut off. Everything's by land based now through Poland.
So I guess that's how Germany intends to get those 500 Stinger missiles into them.
Right, and our javelins that we're sending them over more javelin missiles from the United States. But you've got medical equipment.
Well, does this put Poland on Putin's radar screen?
Yes, it's in jeopardy. I mean, just from the I don't know how many refugees now. I've heard up to 2 million have already left Ukraine. But I don't know. These are figures that are just initially coming in. And most of those are going into Germany and into Poland as well. They're making their way in through Poland into Germany. So this is difficult for Poland. But I don't think that Putin has any plans to incur and cross the borders into Poland at all. I don't think that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Russia has overwhelming air superiority here.
Right.
The number of planes, missiles, jets that they have compared to the Ukrainian army. But, they also had air superiority in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And yet with the use of weapons like the Stinger missile.
That's correct.
The Afghans really made the Russians pay a price. Eventually, the Russians said, we can't, and pulled out. Can you see any possible scenario the same thing will happen here?
No, because it's a different battle area. It's a different battlefield than Afghanistan. You have a tremendous road network that goes from Belarus, Russia, into Ukraine. They can come in all sorts of different routes. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Russians were actually within the Afghan border when all this was occurring. And when their aircraft were taken down by the Mujahideen and the Stinger missiles that we gave them at the time. So it's a different situation, hard to compare the two because they are so different. The battlefield, the layout, everything is so different. Plus you have the closeness of the Russian buildup right on the Ukraine border. Mm-hmm. And Russians can flow forces from all over Russia to that border area if they need them. They have a lot more in reserve than Ukraine would have. So they can bring more reserves in as far as aircraft, naval craft, armored units, missile battalions and units that can deliver these rockets where they can fire like 50 of them at a time, Rick. They just keep going out. They blanket a whole area.
Again, this is a special presentation of the American Uncensored News Network, Crisis in the Ukraine. I'm Rick Trader coming to you from the AUN Studios, and my guest is Major General Paul Vallely, retired, graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He served a distinguished career of 32 years, served in the European and Pacific theaters, and also 2 combat tours in Vietnam. And General, who's running the Russian military? Is it Putin? Is it his generals?
Well, he runs it. Oh, he's in charge. There's no doubt about that.
Much the same way Hitler did?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we're set the same way. The president is commander in chief of our armed forces, right?
Right.
Okay, same thing over there. He runs it.
Well,
And
does he have more direct control of it than, say, one of our presidents would do? In other words, is he relying on his military experts, on his generals, on his chiefs of staffs, or is he managing the chessboard?
well, he's a KGB, he's an intel guy. So that's his mind. He was not a general running divisions and corps and armies, but his senior leadership is very well trained,
Hmm.
as I understand, and I've met some of them. They're very knowledgeable. They know how to conduct a war on all fronts, from air, naval, ground, and so on. And so they run through their exercises just like our military does, where you have these training exercises continually every year, and they practice their craft of military tactics and strategy. And
Hmm.
so, yes, they're very capable. But the Ukrainians had they have very capable generals and officers as well, very well trained. And a lot of the Ukrainian many have been trained in the United States.
General, I heard it said just the other night that Russia has always had three enemies, at least since the end of the Second World War: the United States, NATO, and China. Is this going to bring Russia and China closer together, or do you still see a tremendous cavern between them?
No, they've already come together, Rick. They've already come together. She is 100 supportive of what Putin is doing. And as I said, uh, with the sanctions, the Russians are doing all their workarounds through China. But also, I understand they're doing it through India as well.
Hmm. General, can you foresee Russia getting bogged down in a much the way they did in Afghanistan, and that war become a partisan guerrilla type war?
I think it could, but I don't think Putin will allow that. I think he'll bring overwhelming forces in to ensure he accomplishes his goal of securing the entire country of Ukraine.
No, General, and then the huge elephant in the room is the use of nuclear weapons. You said that he does have battlefield nuclear
Right.
weapons available to you. You think he would actually use them? Do you think that he would actually use thermal nuclear weapons to solve the problem? Or is the Ukraine too important to him and he doesn't necessarily want to destroy the country? He just wants to get rid of the government. What's your feelings about use of nuclear
I
weapons?
think if he's pressed, he'll use the tactical ones. Now, the tactical ones just are concentrated on a certain section or an area. They're not
Right.
like the big ICBMs and the large nuclear weapons at all. Rick, I commanded one of the first battlefield tactical nuclear weapons that we had. It was called the Davy Crockett. And you can go back and Google
I
it.
remember the David Crockett, but other than since the end of World War II, I don't believe nuclear weapons in any form have ever been used.
Right.
Putin uses them here. Does this open another huge can of worms? Does this become a precedent for using nuclear weapons? And will this have backlash coming from around the world towards Putin and Russia for using them?
Yes, and I think Putin knows that, but I don't think he would exercise that with the overwhelming conventional force structure that he has that he can lay out on the battlefield in Ukraine. Uh, I think if Ukrainians were overwhelming his forces, moving them back across the border in an overwhelming way, I think he then would use the tactical area nuclear weapons to destroy, for example, a tank battalion or a division of infantry or something like that. Yes, I think he would. I don't think he's going to be forced into doing that, though. But it
Major
would
Gen-
change the entire nature of war today if we use tactical nuclear weapons, which then could go to global, and the space weapons that they're working on as well, being able to fire a nuclear weapon from a satellite. Chinese are working on that technology as well as us, and they
Mhm.
can take in one satellite and MERV it. If those are multiple independently warheads, they have maybe 8 to 10 that all can be independently programmed, computerized, and hit targets. And so the space war you're going to see is growing and growing. Will be a bigger effect on the world than anything we know now.
There are a lot of people that speculate that Russia may attack us with cyber attacks to slow us down, to threaten us, to warn us.
Right.
What's your feelings?
Yes. You have 5 elements of war today. Prior to this World War II, for example, we had air, we had sea, and we had land. All right. Now we have 2 other. We have cyber attacks, cyber warfare, and we have space warfare. So we've had to add on those 2 to the basic 3. Now there's 5 ways to conduct warfare. Wow. Now let me add on a 6th that General McInerney and I just did, and that's biological attacks.
Well, I think we've seen that over the past 2 years. General Paul Vallely, in wrapping up, what haven't I asked? What is important for our viewers and our listeners to know about this crisis in the Ukraine?
Well, Rick, we can look back and see what's happened as of today. The question is, what do we do about tomorrow? How do we ensure we have the leadership in America to meet the threats against America? First, number 1, protecting the American people. Then our alliances. What are we going to do about NATO? What are we going to do about the 5 or 6 countries that we could put together in a treaty or some binding thing against the Chinese taking over Taiwan and controlling all of the South China Sea?
Well, that's an area. Let me ask you about that. I think that is very important. Is this emboldening the Chinese to look at Taiwan and lick their chops?
Yes, absolutely. And we knew they were waiting until after the Olympics to do something. The timing couldn't be better.
Doesn't that put us in the middle of 2 very hot conflicts? In Europe, what's going on in the Ukraine? If the Chinese go into Taiwan, we've got conflicts on each end of the earth. We are in the middle. Physically, logically, philosophically, military, we're in the middle of this, General. Am I looking at this correctly, or you want to say that?
We're either in the middle or we're looking from the outside. If we're looking from the outside, then what are we going to do about China and Taiwan? Just like Ukraine and Russia now. What are we going to do? What's the United States? We don't have the leadership to do what we need to do, Rick.
So let me get this straight. We've got this leadership for the next 3 years.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, can this change if things change in November? If the Republicans have an overwhelming victory in November to switch the House, to switch the Senate, can that make a difference in the leadership of this country?
That will make a difference. But what do legislators do, Rick? They legislate. They pass bills. They have hearings, but they don't control very much at all anymore. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And you have a judicial system that's not functioning correctly. Crime in America, all of those things going against it. We have to solve our internal problems, Rick. That's with leadership in our cities, our counties. America's being dismantled as we talk. So our battle first is America, Rick, as I see it. And if we strengthen America, that will also portend for Russia and China to look and say, well, America is back again. We're strong again, like we were under Trump. Now, will that happen with just the elections? No. And we can't even count on the elections being fair again. I mean, the Republicans are assuming they're going to do all this, but listen, the Democrats aren't going to sit back. They're going to do whatever they can to take the elections in any of the counties or precincts around the country that they could control. Ballot harvesting, all of those stuff. We haven't corrected the voting inequities at the county and precinct level from the 2020 election. Some states have, but many haven't. So I'm not confident, even if the Republicans take back. Where are the Republican warriors?
I've been asking that question ad nauseum. I know I would love to see the Republicans use the courts the way the Democrats did. The Democrats were very effective in stopping Donald Trump and his agenda by suit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Major General Paul Vallely, we want to thank you so much for joining us here today. Please tell our audience how they could follow you, read your books, and also find out more about Stand Up America US.
Well, they can go to the Stand Up America US Foundation website, which is standupamericaus.org. You can also go on and hear our radio shows on standupamericaUSshow.com. We publish a newsletter every Saturday, which goes out across the world. You can sign up on the website for our newsletter. We continue to do with our tight group of flag officers. We have Flag Officers for America, Rick. I don't know whether you've heard of them or not.
Not yet.
Flag Officers number
And
for
now.
America. We have over 250 flag officers now that are standing up to what's going on. So more on that, but we're tied into about 20 different organizations. We're a big supporter of Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk on our campuses. We're tied in with Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch, for example, Roger Aronoff at the Citizens Commission on National Security. Plus, we have an intelligence apparatus for the foundation, which extends through Europe and into the Middle East. We have a Canadian team that have been watching Canada, what's going on. We have a China team where we published over 22 analysis papers just on China alone. And that all can be derived out of our access through our website, standupamericaus.org.
Well, you know, General, we've got this conflict in the Ukraine. We have one facing us in Taiwan. But no mean, nasty tweets. No mean, nasty tweets. And General, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
Thank you, Rick. Great job.
And this has been a special presentation of the American Uncensored News Network, Crisis in the Ukraine. I'm Rick Trader. We want to thank you for watching. Take care. God bless. God bless America.